Welcome. I'm Karen Lips, president of the Network of Enlightened Women. New is deemed 2021 the year of the conservative woman. As part of this, we are featuring a conservative woman of the month each month. This month, we are pleased to recognize Diana Rickert, vice president of the Liberty Justice Center. Before joining LJC, Rickert built and led the Illinois Policy Institute's communications and media shop. She started her career as a journalist at the young age of 15. Can't wait to ask you about that later, when she was hired by the Chicago Daily Herald. As a student at Marquette, she started an award-winning conservative paper, The Warrior. She holds a BA from Marquette University in journalism and political science and lives outside of Chicago with her husband and two daughters. Diana, thank you so much for joining us today and for being our Conservative Woman of the Month.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, well, I'm excited to jump right in and hear about that story of how you got a writing gig at such a young age and what you learned from that.
Yeah, you know what? It was a tremendous experience. When I was 15, I got a paid writing job with the Daily Herald, which is the #1 suburban newspaper in the Chicago suburbs. And I cold called them and I said, hey, I want to be a reporter when I grow up. Is there anything I can do for you? Here's 10 ideas that I have. Have you ever thought about writing these 10 articles? I read the newspaper every day. And the very kind-hearted editor said, I don't like any of your ideas, but this is really nice. And I appreciate your initiative. So how about you go cover this thing for me on Saturday? I pay $75 a story. And if you bring a camera and take a picture and email it to me, I'll give you another 25. And so that's what I did starting at age 15 through college. I would just call up the editors when I was home from college on the weekends or on the weekends when I didn't have too much homework. And my dad would drive me to my assignments until I had a driver's license. And then the next day I'd see by Diana Soroka in the Daily Herald that my parents and all of my neighbors were reading. And the editors were great. They thought that it was very unusual for a high school student to be interested in getting a position. But I kind of thought, why not? Why not just get started?
That's great. And it shows that you took that initiative and then you took the opportunity that the editors gave you and ran with it. And then how did that influence? I know you started a conservative newspaper in college, and a lot of our young women on college campuses face the bias on campus. So I imagine you came under attack for starting a conservative paper. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so obviously when I started writing in high school, and I did some other writing assignments throughout high school, I kind of got the journalism bug and I loved writing and I loved seeing my work in the newspaper. And I was mostly covering community events. And so then I got to college and I was like, I know that I want to be a journalist. I talked to my professors and they said, okay, if you want to be a journalist, join the campus newspaper. And so then I did. And that was kind of my first experience with a organization that didn't, that was like, it was great, wonderful people, but it wasn't really independent because there was a teacher that could veto any student decision. It's a little bureaucratic. I was coming in with a couple of years of experience at a real newspaper, and then they were like, here, you get to do this thing about freshman activities or crime or whatever it might be. But I think more importantly, I saw that students didn't read it. So I was like, the market doesn't really like the student newspaper and they just keep doing it the same way. And in a real market, if you don't have any customers, you don't exist. So I got together with a couple of friends of mine who we all cooked up this idea to start a conservative student newspaper. And we didn't necessarily set out first to be political or ideological, except that we knew that the school newspaper was super out of touch with students. And there was a flashpoint on campus. There's always campus politics where the university had suggested start changing the name of the mascot for athletics to Warriors, which is what it used to be. And then the politically correct crowd said, you can't do this, it's offensive, we don't want to offend everybody, it's politically incorrect. And every student on campus wanted to reclaim the Warriors name. And the student newspaper on campus at the time decided to side with the administration, which was the least popular opinion. And I was like, that's it. They are super out of touch. So we started a student newspaper that was completely independent, completely self-funded, completely student run, called the warrior. And just by choosing that name, it was a signal that we were kind of like the populist student newspaper. Like we were aligned with the student body. And it was a very, very interesting like social experiment to start this student newspaper, because I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to do my newspaper thing. I'm going to write an article. We're going to copy edit it. This is not a good lead. Let's get a better picture. And what was really going on was that the university administrators were going nuts over the idea that you could just start a newspaper without them, and that people would give you money to run ads in this paper. And I have so many stories from like them sending the campus public safety to tell us to get off of university property. We could only stand on public sidewalks, and having to get our own apartment to rent as an office. So we were working kind of underground, and like administrators that were like, who gave you the money for this? And they could not believe that we could just go sell an ad and someone would give us money, and then we would give that money to a printer and print it and like hand it to people. Like it was mind blowing. And I was like, whoa, like it took a while for me to realize like this is just like this microcosm of America and what happens, and like how you have legacy news outlets that are completely out of touch with the public. And what I'm reading in the newspaper and all these news outlets I aspire to work for someday is so disconnected from what the public really thinks about America. And this was really the first time I started to understand that, because of how the administration responded. And it was, I mean, besides the experience of writing articles and working as an editor and designing pages, doing the entire business side of the newspaper and having to respond to the market and to students was an amazing crash course in just how the real world works.
That's fascinating that they tried to shut you down. You would think administrators, you'd want them to be excited about students taking initiative and starting, your own little, in some ways, like business, right? And being entrepreneurial. So it's fascinating that their instinct was to shut down. And I think that silencing, unfortunately, is still happening today. And it's interesting how you mentioned it's an example of what's happening in media and what's going on. Could you talk a little bit about, if you could change the media landscape today, how would you change it? What do you think needs to happen? We obviously have a problem with our media. How do we go about fixing that?
So after college, I did go on to work in journalism, and I got an opportunity to work in a lot of remarkable newsrooms with very talented journalists. I worked at the Associated Press, helping them with their elections coordination. Had a great internship at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which was very eye-opening because it's a union-run staff, and so everyone is unionized there except for their management. And then I even went on in farther along in my post-college days. I ended up writing for the opinion page of the Chicago Tribune, and I went on to write about 50 columns there. So I started to accumulate sort of a collection of experiences in very legacy news outlets, very top tier. And what I saw back then was that there was kind of a divide in the newsroom. There were kind of your old school liberals who were capital J journalists, and they were like, if this is a story, we give it to the people, and it doesn't matter who might be getting upset about it. Like, I don't care about people in power, politicians, whoever calls me. And there was definitely a tribe of those. And then there was a kind of like an emerging tribe of people that they were more politically inclined, and they kind of had a point of view, and they didn't believe that newspapers responded to market forces. They didn't think they needed to mingle with regular people. They actually kind of said that they considered themselves some sort of like third estate or fourth estate, where they're not really regular people, but they're regular people with special jobs, and their job is to float above society and tell society what they're doing, and that they were quasi public servants, and like they were really writing a lot of content that was tailored to their point of view. And of course, a lot of journalists have aspirations of working for higher and bigger publications. So you could see who was basically auditioning for the Daily Kos or Mother Jones or something like that. Like you're in Milwaukee in an urban environment, and somebody's like, I think we need to write about Darfur and how it's affecting Milwaukee. And you're like, okay, like, aren't you supposed to be writing about like crime on the South Side or something? Like, and they might like come up with these like very highfalutin New York elite ideas that had nothing to do with neighborhood reporting or community reporting. And then you could start to see like little dynamics inside the newsrooms where you've got CNN on all day or MSNBC on all day, and how people are reacting to it. And that then when I started to look at the actual content in the paper and how that aligned, it was like, like this is not the same media that I grew up admiring. Like this is not like Mike Royko's newspaper in Chicago, or this is not the Journal Sentinel or the Journal from Milwaukee from decades ago. And people really shape culture. And a lot of it was really driven by individual contributors who maybe thought that this is what a journalist is. And some people are very well meaning, and then some people like clearly had an agenda, and like their mission in life was to go spread progressivism or liberalism or whatever it is their belief, atheism, like among the world, using the news as their vehicle. Again, doesn't make them bad people, just makes them really liberal and really distorts what people are expecting of the news. And now what I've seen a really dramatic shift over the last 10 years. And it's kind of interesting because I've been out of writing for the news for a couple of years now, focusing on some other things. And I'm almost like, whoa, I don't think I could even write anymore because I would get canceled, or people would like show up with pitchforks to my house. Like, you're kind of not allowed to say these things anymore. I think the culture has really taken an extreme turn where there's just points of view and issues that are accepted and others that are not. And it starts with being accepted in your peer group in the newspaper, and then being accepted by the management in the newspaper, and then just being accepted writ large by the journalism community. And I've also seen the news really stop holding officials accountable, because I think that they've taken this idea that they are like regular people with special jobs, like to believe that they are like, part of the Biden administration or part of a governor's office, and this is their peer group, and that super matters to them, and status and access. And so they've really, let that cloud their judgment about what's in the news. And I see a lot of the most important stories in America coming out of unlikely sources first. They're not coming out of the major news outlets. They're not coming out of the major publications. They're really coming out of these outlets that are a little bit off the beaten path. And then they make their way back to the major national news when they can't be ignored anymore. And that's not really how it always used to be.
Well, and I wonder if this divide and maybe the second group taking over newsrooms more has influenced your decision to get out of journalism and now move into the comp side. Could you talk a little bit about your work at the Liberty Justice Center and what you were doing from a communications perspective there, and how much you interface with journalists now?
Yeah, so I have been working in a communications capacity for almost a decade now. I was even able to do some of my writing for the Tribune while I was still working in a communications capacity at a state-based think tank, the Illinois Policy Institute. And really what worked super well for me transitioning to a different arena of the journalism world was that I knew how journalists think, and I knew what makes a story. And I knew what you need to have a successful pitch, because I had been there. People used to pitch me. And I saw the evolution of stories. So I kind of reverse engineered, like, what does it take to get the attention of a reporter? And I was able to kind of carve out a method where I was looking at, who is this reporter? What makes them tick? Should I go to them? Should I not go to them? What are they interested in? And I have to say, a lot of them, they aren't political. They're just trying to survive and file as many stories as they need to. And they're not bad people. Sometimes they might only get pitches from uber liberal groups that have progressive things to say and make it seem like this is a big story. And so there's a kind of like a squeaky wheel political game that goes on in pitching. And I was like, well, the conservatives need a voice too, to be the squeaky wheel and say, here, there's a story here, there's a story here, there's something going on here. And then also the business is built on relationships. So I built a network of relationships with people, many who I would consider friends. And I was like, we just need to feed the beast. They got to file these stories. We need to feed the beast. This is a good story for this outlet. This is a print story. This is a broadcast story. This is a radio interview. Here's the right person for this. And I was very focused on giving the customer what they need. Because, in the end, like, I think market forces generally serve us well in most environments, but then also really understanding how they tick and what makes them tick. And like, you're never going to take a 40-year liberal columnist and convert them. Like, that's just not going to happen. So do you really want to pitch them? Or do you want to go to this other person that might be more amenable? Or maybe you really do want the liberal columnist to cover you because you want them to talk about why your idea is so bad because it exposes the other side for who they are. And so there's a strategy to it. So I was able to take that. And it really culminated in 2018 when I had the opportunity to work on a Supreme Court case. And I did all of the media and messaging for the Janus versus AFSCME case that Liberty Justice Center brought. And that was just so pivotal in putting our issue on the map and putting Liberty Justice Center on the map, interfacing with these national reporters at very, very top tier outlets that have reporters exclusively covering the Supreme Court, and seeing the dynamics at play and just the different personalities. So many wonderful people, so many people that you were like, so this is how the story comes out this way. That's so interesting. Like I don't know that I would have done it that way. Probably shouldn't be done that way, but like now I understand why it looks like that. Seeing which outlets were completely closed to an alternative point of view, which was ultimately the victorious point of view in the Supreme Court case, until they really, really had to accept that this was the decision. So all of this training all along, starting in college and high school with working at local newsrooms and just meeting people and doing small stories and working my way up to this top tier national media, it all really came together.
Well, and it sounds like those skills early on really fed into what you're doing now. And you shared with us a little bit about how the sausage is being made, which is fascinating. So the stories don't just appear, right? You've got to be really strategic, pitch them to reporters, work with reporters to catch their eye, because I do see some of my reporter friends. I mean, the pace is so fast, and they've got such high expectations to file quickly that it's important to really try to catch their eye to get a story out there. And you mentioned that you used to work at the Illinois Policy Institute. Could you talk about how you made a difference at the state level, and then in your transition to the Liberty Justice Center, what you all are focused on in terms of how you want to have an impact in this country?
Yeah, so when I first left journalism full time, when I had left working at a daily newspaper in the northwest suburbs in Chicago, I first came to the Illinois Policy Institute. And what initially attracted me was the work that they were doing uncovering waste and abuse and terrible things in Illinois state government, which, if you know anything about Illinois, you know that that's very plentiful. And so as a journalist, I was doing investigative work, and I was winning awards, journalism awards, for investigating bloated government pensions, public employees who get like 3 and 4 months off and paid time off a year, and like all sorts of, budget issues. And then I found this organization that did this every day. And as a journalist, I was having to carve out time to write those investigative pieces because I was covering, community events. And they did this every day. And I never thought I would leave journalism ever. I thought, like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And then their work caught my eye, and they happened to have a position open in media relations at the time when I was getting to know them and interviewing them. So I transitioned to Illinois Policy Institute and had a great run there. Great folks making a very big difference at the state level, blocking tax increases along the way, putting pressure on lawmakers over what would seemingly be benign bills that were crazy. And I started working through my Illinois Policy Institute role with the Liberty Justice Center, which was just getting started at the time, and just had 1 or 2 lawyers that were filing cases here and there. And then in 2017, in October, so the Liberty Justice Center found out that the US Supreme Court was taking one of its cases, Janus versus AFSCME. And we knew right away that this was going to be a major flashpoint in American history, certainly in American labor law, and that the way to really win these cases and do well is not just in the courtroom, but to create a tidal wave of public support and media support for this point of view, so that it didn't seem like the Supreme Court is going to go out there and do something that the public is totally against. And a lot of people don't realize just how important that the media, marketing, public affairs is to everything that's happening in politics or in the legal world. So I moved over to Liberty Justice Center as its first full-time vice president, and I did all of that media around the case, and then we went on to win the case. And since that time, since winning the Janice case in 2018, we have grown tremendously. We are no longer doing work just in the state of Illinois. In the last 3 years, we have filed 51 new lawsuits in 25 states. We have a team of 9 attorneys, and we'll be adding more attorneys later this year. And we are so excited that we're doing work not just in the workers' rights, labor union space, but also on school choice, free speech, cancel culture, representing journalists who get kicked out of press events because they disagree with the politician that they're covering, and looking into other pressing issues like how do we roll back some of these COVID regulations that seem to not be going away? How do we attack the online platforms that are silencing conservatives? So it's been a really exciting career path and a really exciting way to take my initial set of skills and work them through a different avenue with litigation as our tool.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned cancel culture and free speech, because those are, of course, issues that come up for our students on campus. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, as conservatives on campus, they often are under attack. How do you get the inspiration to continue being a leader, to continue fighting the fight? And what advice would you have for young women who want to be leaders now and in the future? What skills should they be developing? What advice do you have for them?
So the best piece of advice that I ever received was from one of my professors at Marquette, who's kind of an old school liberal who loved our student newspaper, quietly loved it. And he just said, make yourself indispensable. Find something that you can do that delivers value, go deliver value, and be valuable to an organization. And I was the first person in my family to go to college and to graduate from college. So I didn't really know how to navigate this college degree world and like white collar world. And I really just took that advice and I ran with it. And I think the other thing that I would maybe say is I like to take opportunities as they come. And a lot of times they mean working extra hard, or maybe you've got an all-nighter on the weekend, or it's a job on top of a job. Like when I started writing for the Tribune, that wasn't like a job. It was on top of my job at the Illinois Policy Institute, but I loved it and I saw the impact that it could have. So I made it work. And those are the things that really enrich your career along the way, like going the extra mile and thinking expansively about how you fit in this world. And what motivates me, I just think it's such a gift to be able to work in this field and to make a difference every day. I know that, our time in this space might be limited. You never know how long you can work in this arena and how long you'll have impact. And I don't want to work in this arena if I'm not having impact. I don't want to just be calling it a job and phoning it in every day. So for the time that I have, I'm going to give it my all. And I'm going to be an example to my daughters. And I'm going to fight for people who are supporting us because they, are very generous supporters. They give us money and they give us funding so that we can go do good things. And I want to fight for them and show them that like America is not lost. There are good people who believe in our founding principles, and we're going to fight to protect them because those are so special. And that's always been very personal to me. So I guess that is what really motivates me. And for as long as I can do this, I'm going to seize that opportunity because it is really a privilege and it's a gift. And I hope that anyone who's considering a career in this line of work would really see it that way. It's not really the best way to get rich. It's not really the easiest. It won't make you the most popular mom at drop off at school. It's kind of hard to explain on career day, right? But you get to say to your kids like, wow, America is this amazing country and with these amazing founding principles that have sustained us for over 200 years. And my job every day is to protect those. How awesome is that? And so that would be my advice, see what you can offer, work your hardest along the way. If you stop delivering impact, stop, get out of it, make sure you are delivering impact, make yourself indispensable, be innovative, don't just be mad at the system, work it and improve it. because we have a really special place in society to be able to do this.
Well, those are some great words to end on. And Diane, I really want to thank you for being part of this. Thank you for being our Conservative Woman of the Month. And I'd love to give you an opportunity to share the website of Liberty Justice Center. And if you could also share maybe a favorite book that you've read recently or listened to. I know our audience always loves getting tips from our interviewees.
Sure. So our website is libertyjusticecenter.org. And I'd encourage everyone to go on there. We have a great new campaign called 1A Warriors. So if you are really passionate about free speech and cancel culture, you can become one of our 1A Warriors. And I love that the name kind of goes along with our college newspaper. So it kind of is a little sentimental for me, but 1A Warriors. My favorite book. So when Illinois got locked down at the start of the COVID pandemic, my daughter and I started reading the Little House books. And so even though they kind of seem like children's books, there's so much to learn there. And there's so much that is missing. Like there's a lot of lessons of independence and self-reliance and personal responsibility and really soldiering on. And I have found reading those books to her to be very inspirational, and kind of bring me back to a simpler place where it seems like America was in a different mindset than it is today, or it is when you read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Washington Post. So I'd recommend for any adult to go back and read those, because they're not just for children. There's a lot of good lessons in there that really inspire me as a conservative and as a woman.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.